She thought the marriage was fake until he introduced her as his wife and refused to let go the first time she heard him call her his wife. It wasn't part of the plan. It happened under crystal chandeliers surrounded by strangers who mattered more than they should have. Cameras flashed. Voices hushed, and before she could correct him, before she could step back or breathe, "This is my wife." His arm slid around her waist, firm and unmistakable, and he did not let go. Lena Morris had never imagined marriage would start with a contract. She sat across from a man she barely knew in a private office overlooking the city, hands folded tightly in her lap, trying not to stare at the document in front of her like it might explode. Marriage agreement, fixed duration, 12 months. "This is strictly formal," the man said calmly. Ethan Cross did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. Authority clung to him, effortlessly tall, composed, dressed in dark precision, the kind of man whose presence shifted rooms without permission. "There will be no romance," he continued. "No intimacy. No expectations beyond public appearances." Lena swallowed. "And after a year, we divorce quietly," Ethan said. "You receive full compensation, no conditions." She glanced at the number again. It made her chest tighten, enough to pay off her mother's medical bills, enough to stop the eviction notices. Enough to finally breathe. "You're asking me to marry you," she said slowly, "for business." "Yes." "For appearances." "Yes." "And you don't even want to know me?" Ethan's eyes lifted to hers, cool, assessing, unreadable. "That would complicate things." She almost laughed, almost. "You realize how insane this sounds," Lena said. "I realize how necessary it is." He stood and walked toward the window, hands clasped behind his back. "My family controls a multinational holding company," he said. "My grandfather's will requires a stable marriage before leadership transfers fully to me. If not, the board intervenes." "And you couldn't find someone else?" she asked. "Someone closer to your world?" "I don't need someone ambitious," Ethan replied. "I need someone invisible." The words stung more than she expected. She looked down at the contract again. This wasn't romance. This was survival. "What if I say no?" she asked quietly. Ethan turned back to her. "Then I wish you well." No pressure, no persuasion. That scared her more than desperation ever could. She signed the papers 2 days later. The wedding was small, efficient, and painfully quiet. No guests, no vows written from the heart, just legal signatures and a gold band slid onto her finger by a man whose touch was careful, distant. "Congratulations," the officiant said. Ethan released her hand immediately, as if afraid of something. They didn't live together at first. They didn't talk much either. Text messages about schedules, appearances, what color to wear, when to smile, everything controlled, everything fake, until the gala. It was the first major public event since the marriage, a charity auction attended by investors, press, and people who measured worth by association. Lena stood beside Ethan at the entrance, her spine straight, smile rehearsed. "Remember," she murmured under her breath, "we stick to the plan." Ethan nodded. "Of course." Inside, the room buzzed with attention. Eyes followed them, whispers trailed. Ethan greeted donors with ease, moving through conversations like a man born to command them. Lena stayed half a step behind him, just as they'd practiced. Then a woman approached, elegant, sharp-eyed, familiar. "Ethan," she said, lips curving into a knowing smile. "You've been very quiet lately." He stiffened. "And you must be the wife," the woman added, gaze sliding over Lena with open curiosity. Ethan didn't hesitate. He stepped closer to Lena. "This is my wife," he said, voice calm but absolute. "Lena Cross." The room shifted. Lena felt it, the attention, the weight, the sudden permanence of the word. "Wife." His hand settled at her waist, fingers firm, grounding. She smiled automatically. The woman's brows lifted. "Oh, how unexpected." "Yes," Ethan replied coolly. "It was." The woman lingered a moment longer, then moved on. Lena turned to Ethan the second they were alone. "That wasn't how we rehearsed it," she whispered. His hand didn't move. "It was necessary," he said. "You didn't ask." "I didn't need to." Something about that made her pulse quicken, not with attraction but with awareness. People watched them now, assessed them, and Ethan played the role flawlessly, too flawlessly. Throughout the evening, his hand stayed on her back, his gaze flicked to her whenever someone spoke too sharply. He corrected assumptions before she could open her mouth. At one point, a man laughed and said, "You're lucky, not many women get to marry into power like this." Before Lena could respond, Ethan's grip tightened. She didn't marry me for power, he said quietly. She married me because she chose to. The man flushed and retreated. Lena stared up at Ethan. That was not in the contract. Later, on the balcony overlooking the city, she finally pulled away. You're crossing lines, she said. Ethan turned to face her, eyes dark in the night. I'm protecting the marriage, he replied. This marriage isn't real. His gaze held hers longer than necessary. It needs to look that way, he said. The words should have reassured her. Instead, they sent a chill down her spine. Because when they re-entered the room and someone asked again, "How long have you two been married?" Ethan didn't hesitate. Long enough, he said, and when Lena tried to step away, tried to remind herself, he did something that shattered every boundary they'd set. He pulled her closer, and he refused to let go. By the end of the night, Lena understood one terrifying truth. She had agreed to a fake marriage, but Ethan Cross was no longer pretending. By the end of the first week, Lena stopped correcting people. It wasn't a conscious decision. It just happened every time someone said your husband or Mrs. Cross. She felt a flicker of resistance rise and then fade. Correcting them required explanation. Explanation invited questions. Questions created cracks, and cracks were dangerous. Ethan, on the other hand, never hesitated. Talk to my wife. My wife will handle that. Yes, my wife and I will be attending. Each time he said it, his voice carried the same certainty. No emphasis, no performance, as if the word had always belonged there. That unsettled her more than the contract ever had. They moved into the penthouse on day 8. It wasn't part of the original agreement. It was supposed to wait until the press cycle demanded it. But a leaked photo changed everything. Ethan stepping out of a car alone, wedding ring visible, no wife in sight. Speculation exploded overnight. She should stay here, his publicist insisted over speakerphone, at least for now. Lena stood frozen in the doorway, suitcase at her feet. Ethan didn't look at her when he said, "That's fine." Fine, like her entire life hadn't just been folded into his without ceremony. The penthouse was massive, cold, and immaculate, floor-to-ceiling windows, muted colors. Nothing personal except a single framed photograph on a side table. Ethan as a boy, standing beside an older man with the same sharp eyes. My grandfather, Ethan said when he noticed her looking. The reason for all this. She nodded, suddenly understanding the weight behind his control. You'll take the guest room, he continued. The door locks, I won't enter without permission. She studied him. You say that like you expect me to be afraid. I expect you to feel safe, he replied. That was worse. Living together created a new kind of intimacy, one neither of them acknowledged. Mornings overlapped. Evenings stretched longer. She learned he drank his coffee black and read financial reports like novels. He learned she hummed when she was nervous and always lined up her shoes before bed. They spoke mostly about logistics, schedules, events, appearances, but sometimes too often silence filled the space between them, and it was never empty. At a board luncheon, a senior investor laughed too loudly and leaned too close. Careful, the man said, eyes flicking to Lena's ring. You married well. Ethan didn't raise his voice. He stepped forward, hand settling firmly at Lena's waist. She married me, he said coolly, not my balance sheet. The table went quiet. Lena felt the pressure of his hand, the warmth of it, the unmistakable message being sent. She should have pulled away. She didn't. In the car afterward, her pulse still raced. You didn't need to do that, she said. Yes, Ethan replied. I did. Why? He glanced at her, expression unreadable. Because he disrespected you. Something in his tone, flat, final, made her throat tighten. The contradictions began to pile up. Ethan was distant in private but intensely present in public. He avoided touching her unless someone else was watching, but when they were watched, he didn't hold back, a hand on her lower back, a thumb brushing her hip. A possessive pull when someone stood too close. Once, during a crowded fundraiser, she whispered, "You're overdoing it." His mouth barely moved as he replied, "They need to believe it." "And you?" she asked quietly. His jaw tightened. "I already do." The words echoed long after the moment passed. Late one night, unable to sleep, Lena wandered into the kitchen. Ethan was already there, no jacket, shirt sleeves rolled, a glass of whiskey untouched on the counter. They stared at each other like they'd been caught somewhere they didn't belong. You don't sleep much, she said. I don't shut my mind off easily. She nodded. Me neither. They sat across from each other, the city glowing beyond the glass. You regret this, she said softly. Ethan didn't answer right away. I regret that it's necessary, he said finally. And me, his gaze lifted slowly to hers. No, the single word landed harder than a confession. You don't talk about your past, she said. You don't ask, he replied. She smiled faintly. I didn't think I was allowed. You are, he said quietly. I just don't know how to explain it. She studied him, the tension in his shoulders, the restraint threaded through every movement. You don't trust people, she said. I trust systems, and I'm not a system. No, he agreed, you're a variable. The honesty startled her. 2 days later, everything shifted. Lena overheard a phone call. Ethan stood in his office, voice low but sharp. She's fulfilling her role, he said. Yes, the marriage is convincing. Lena stopped breathing. She won't complicate things, he continued. It's temporary. Her chest tightened painfully. So that was it. That night she confronted him. Is that all I am? She asked. Convincing? Ethan went still. You weren't meant to hear that, but I did. Silence pressed in. You said this wouldn't be emotional, he said finally. I didn't say I wouldn't feel anything, she replied. His gaze darkened. That's where this becomes dangerous. For you, she said, or for me? He didn't answer. That was answer enough. Later, alone in the guest room, Lena stared at the ring on her finger. She had agreed to play a role, but somewhere between the introductions and the unspoken protection, something had changed. The marriage was still fake. But the way Ethan looked at her, the way he claimed her without hesitation, the way he refused to let go when others were watching. That was starting to feel terrifyingly real, and Lena wasn't sure how much longer she could pretend it was. Lena stopped wearing the ring to bed on the 12th night. It wasn't a decision born of anger or rebellion. It was quieter than that, an instinctive need to draw a line somewhere before she forgot where pretending ended and truth began. She left it on the bedside table instead. In the morning, Ethan noticed immediately. His gaze dropped to her bare hand as she poured coffee, then lifted back to her face without comment, but something tightened in his expression, subtle, controlled, unmistakable. You forgot something, he said calmly. No, Lena replied, I didn't. Silence followed. Ethan didn't argue. He simply nodded once and returned to his tablet. That should have reassured her. It didn't. The foundation dinner that evening was supposed to be routine. Smaller crowd, less press. A chance for the board to regroup after weeks of scrutiny. Instead, it became the night everything fractured. They arrived together, polished and composed. Ethan's hand rested lightly at her back, not gripping, not claiming, observing. People noticed. They always did. A board member approached midway through the evening, smile sharp with intent. Mrs. Cross, he said, glancing pointedly at Lena's hand. No ring tonight? Lena opened her mouth. She doesn't need jewelry to be my wife, Ethan said evenly. His hand slid lower, firm again, possessive. The board member raised a brow. Of course. As he walked away, Lena turned to Ethan, pulse racing. That wasn't necessary, she whispered. Yes, he replied. It was. You don't get to decide how I represent this marriage. Ethan's jaw tightened. When people test it, I respond. And when I test it, she asked. He met her gaze. That, he said quietly, is different. The answer unsettled her more than anger ever could have. Later, on the terrace overlooking the city, Lena finally said what had been building for days. You're changing the rules. Ethan didn't look away from the skyline. No, I'm enforcing them. That's not the same thing. He turned to face her then, eyes dark, guarded. This arrangement only works if people believe it, he said, and belief requires consistency. You mean control, she replied. Yes, he said without hesitation. The honesty stole her breath. And what happens when the contract ends, she asked. Do you just let go? Ethan went still. That's the agreement, he said, but is it what you want? The question hung between them. For a long moment he didn't answer, then quietly, what I want isn't relevant. Something inside her broke at that. Then stop touching me like it is, she said. His hand dropped instantly. Regret flashed across his face, but too late. The breaking point came 3 days later. Lena wasn't meant to hear it. She was halfway down the hall when she heard Ethan's voice through the office door. I don't need sentiment, he said sharply. I need stability. She froze. The marriage ends cleanly, he continued. She's already agreed. Her chest tightened. No, she won't cause problems, Ethan added. She understands her role. Lena stepped back as if the words had physical weight. Role. That night, she packed a bag, not everything, just enough. She was folding a sweater when Ethan appeared in the doorway. "You're leaving?" It wasn't a question. "I need space," Lena said, keeping her voice steady. "Before I forget, this was fake." His eyes darkened. "It was never fake," she laughed once, sharp, humorless. "Then why did you just tell the board I was a role?" Ethan went very still. "You shouldn't have heard that, but I did." Silence stretched thick and heavy. "You said you wouldn't let this get emotional," he said finally. "I didn't agree to be disposable," she replied. "You're not," he said quickly. "Then what am I?" He opened his mouth and stopped. The hesitation was worse than any answer. "I can't do this," Lena whispered. "Not if you only reach for me when someone's watching." Ethan stepped closer. "That's not true. Then why do you only hold me when I'm about to pull away?" The words hit something raw. His hand lifted, then dropped. "If you walk out," he said quietly, "this marriage ends." She nodded. "Then maybe it should." She passed him without another word. The elevator doors closed between them like a verdict. Ethan stood alone in the penthouse long after she was gone. The space felt larger without her. Colder, he stared at the empty guest room, the untouched ring on the table, the silence screaming where her presence had been. For the first time in years, control failed him. And for the first time, he understood the truth he'd been avoiding since the night he first called her his wife. The marriage was never fake. Only the way he'd tried to protect himself was, and if he didn't let go of control, he was going to lose her for real. Lena didn't cry when she left. She'd expected to, prepared for it even, but the tears never came. What settled in her chest instead was heavier, like something unfinished had finally demanded to be acknowledged. She checked into a modest hotel across town, the kind of place no one looked twice at. No marble floors, no staff who knew her name, just quiet. For the first time in weeks, she took off the ring and placed it on the nightstand without ceremony. She slept. The world did not. By morning, speculation exploded. Photos of Ethan Cross attending events alone surfaced. Headlines sharpened. Rumors took on certainty. Contract marriage exposed. Billionaire's wife disappears. Strategic union collapses. Ethan watched it all from his office in silence. The board meeting that afternoon was brutal. "You assured us this was stable," one member snapped. "You said she understood her role," another added. Ethan rose slowly from his chair. "She is not a role," he said coldly. The room stilled. "She is my wife," he continued. "And if you intend to discuss her as anything less, this meeting is over." "You're jeopardizing the foundation," someone shot back. Ethan's jaw tightened. "No," he said, "I'm choosing it." The words tasted like truth for the first time. Lena avoided the news. She avoided everything that reminded her of him, but avoidance had limits. 3 days later, she turned on the television by accident and saw Ethan at a press conference, alone, suit impeccable, expression unreadable. A reporter asked the question she'd been dreading. "Mr. Cross, is your marriage real?" Ethan didn't deflect. "Yes," he said, Lena's breath caught. "And where is your wife?" His gaze hardened, not angry but resolute. "Where she needs to be," he replied. There was no bitterness in his voice, only certainty. She turned off the TV with shaking hands. That night her phone rang. "Ethan," she stared at the screen until it stopped ringing, then it rang again. She answered on the third try. "Say what you need to say," she said quietly. There was a pause. "I failed you," Ethan said. The admission stole her breath. "I tried to control something that needed honesty," he continued, "and I don't want to do that anymore." Her chest ached. "You never gave me a choice," she whispered. "You decided everything." "I know," he said, "and I'm done deciding for you." Silence stretched. "I told the board the truth," he added, "that the marriage was never strategic to me." Her heart pounded. "What does that mean?" "It means they're furious," he said, "and that I don't care." She swallowed. "You can't keep risking everything for me." "I already did," he replied, "the moment I let myself want you." The words sank deep. "I'm not asking you to come back," Ethan said carefully. "I'm asking you to choose without pressure, without obligation." She closed her eyes. "That's not fair," she whispered. "I know." Another silence. "If you say no," he continued, "I will let you go." The promise in his voice hurt more than possession ever could have. "I need time," Lena said. "Take it," Ethan replied. The line went dead. The next morning, Lena walked through the city aimlessly. She thought about the way Ethan had defended her when it cost him power. About the way he'd always stepped in front of her without asking, about the fear that had driven him more than ambition ever had. She also thought about herself. About how easily she'd slipped into being claimed, about how close she'd come to disappearing inside someone else's certainty. By evening, her choice was clear. Ethan was alone in the penthouse when the elevator chimed. He didn't move. When the doors opened and Lena stepped out, his breath left him slowly. She didn't look angry, she looked resolved. "I didn't come back because you asked," she said immediately, "or because the press is watching." "I know," he replied quietly. "I came back because if this ends," she continued, "it needs to end honestly." He nodded. She took a step closer. "You don't get to hold me because it looks convincing," she said, "or because you're afraid of losing control." "I won't," Ethan said. "You don't get to decide what I am to you," she added. "Or when." "I won't," he repeated. Her gaze softened slightly. "And if I stay," she said, "it's because I choose you, not because you refuse to let go." Ethan met her eyes. "Then that's the only way I want you to stay." The silence between them stretched, fragile, electric. Lena reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the ring. She held it between them. "This doesn't own me," she said. "Do you understand?" "Yes," Ethan said. She didn't put it back on, not yet. "This is the last chance," she said, "for both of us." Ethan nodded once. "No more control," he said, "only truth." She searched his face, then stepped closer into his space, not his grasp. For the first time since the contract was signed, nothing stood between them. And for the first time, letting go didn't feel like loss. It felt like the only way forward. The silence between them didn't rush to be filled. Lena stood in the center of the penthouse, the ring still resting in her palm, its weight no longer symbolic but deliberate. Ethan didn't move toward her. He didn't reach out. He waited. That more than anything told her he had finally understood. "I won't stay in a marriage that survives on fear," Lena said quietly. "Fear of scandal, fear of loss, fear of being alone." "I know," Ethan replied. "I lived there for too long." She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something different than the man who had first offered her a contract. This man was stripped of strategy. "I don't want to be introduced as your wife because you're afraid to lose me," she continued. "I want to be introduced because you're proud to stand beside me." His voice was steady when he answered, "Then that's the only way I'll ever say it again." Lena exhaled slowly. She stepped closer. "This ends one of two ways," she said. "We walk away now cleanly. Or we stay, and this time it's real, no contracts, no exits." Ethan didn't hesitate. "I'm already there," he said. She lifted the ring not as an offering, as a choice. "I choose you," Lena said, "but only if you let me choose you every day." Ethan's throat tightened. "I will." She slid the ring back onto her finger herself. This time it fit. The press conference the next morning was chaos. Cameras crowded the steps of the Hale Foundation. Reporters shouted questions before Ethan and Lena even reached the podium. "Mr. Cross, is the marriage real? Was it arranged? Did your wife leave you?" Ethan lifted a hand. The noise fell. "This is my wife," he said calmly, gesturing to Lena. "Lena Cross, not sharp, not possessive, certain. She is not here because of contracts, leverage, or obligation," he continued. "She is here because she chose to be." Lena stepped forward. "And I'm not staying," she added clearly, "because I was asked to. I'm staying because I want to." The murmurs shifted from suspicion to surprise. A reporter called out, "So the marriage wasn't fake?" Ethan looked at Lena before answering. "No," he said. "Only the fear was." His hand found hers, not gripping, not anchoring, just there. Life didn't magically soften after that. The board resisted. The media speculated. Power structures tested boundaries, but something had changed. Ethan no longer spoke over Lena, he spoke with her. He didn't shield her from rooms, he invited her into them. And when people questioned her presence, he didn't answer for her, he let her speak. And she did. Months later, on a quiet evening, Lena stood in the kitchen watching Ethan cook badly. "You know," she said, smiling, "this started with a deal." He glanced at her. "Worst negotiation of my life." She laughed softly. "And yet you refused to let go." He set the pan down and walked toward her slowly. "I thought holding on meant control," he said. "I didn't know it could mean trust." She stepped into his space willingly. "This," she said, resting her forehead against his chest, "is the only version I'll stay for." He wrapped his arms around her, not to keep her from leaving, but because she had chosen to stay. And when he whispered this time, "This is my wife," there was no audience, no pressure, no fear, only truth. Because the marriage she thought was fake had become the realest thing either of them had ever chosen. And this time, he didn't refuse to let go, she didn't want him to.